allow us to express our joy that you have all come here in this way. That is, that you have come here in order to study Dhamma and to train the mind. The point that we'd like to examine now is in what way or method will we study Dhamma in order to get the most benefit and the best results. In this first stage, we have the feeling that most of you don't have much of an appetite for these things. We're not talking about hunger, but of a proper appetite. For most of you, this is either lacking or rather small. So we'd like to discuss a few things in order to help you have an appetite that is robust and full. If you don't have enough of a good appetite, then there won't be enough of what we call the itipata. The itipata are 4 paths to success, which are chanta, which is satisfaction and interest in what we're doing. Viriya is to put effort into it. Citta is to pay attention, to give attention to. And then vimamsa is to investigate. A good appetite is necessary to have these 4 qualities, which are paths to success. In order to have a good appetite, there are certain facts that you must know in order to have a proper foundation for the study of Dhamma and for your learning of meditation. The first thing is we have to know certain basic truths about ourselves, about these bodies and minds, and about this world in which we live. All of Buddhism can be analyzed into 4 basic areas. And these 4 areas are the 4 basic meanings of the word Dhamma. Dhamma, first of all, means nature. Second, Dhamma means the law of nature. Third, Dhamma is the duty that must be practiced according to the natural law. And fourth, Dhamma are the results that come from practicing correctly in harmony with natural law. Even in just these bodies of ours, all 4 of these natural truths are present. Natural truth in these 4 aspects can all be found right here in these bodies. These bodies are just natural things arising in and out of nature. And all the time these bodies and all that makes them up are happening and changing according to the law of nature. These bodies and every organ and cell within them have their duties to perform according to the law of nature. And then all the time these bodies are receiving the results of whether those duties were performed correctly or incorrectly. However the duties, the responsibilities were carried out, the results of that will be happening continuously. So all 4 of these satchadhammas or satchadhammas, truths, all these natural truths are found within this body. that we have problems or that we haven't been completely successful in life is because we have acted incorrectly according to the law of nature. And so we have to find out or learn how to live in harmony with the law of nature so that we can be successful in whatever it is we do, even if just concerning the needs of this body. We have to realize all these aspects of nature. We need to realize and understand them so we can stop fighting against nature, so we don't have to struggle against nature anymore. By understanding these natural truths, we can live in harmony with, we can work together with nature for our own benefit and for the benefit of others. Once we've known the natural truth, then we need to move on to understanding the ultimate law of nature. This is a quality that is often, or a characteristic that is often attributed to God, that of being the ultimate law of the universe, of nature. This absolute and ultimate law is something that requires our understanding. The most fundamental law for human life is called paticca samuppada, which means dependent origination. And what this law basically says is that if we do this, then suffering, mental pain will arise. But if we do this, then no suffering will occur, and there will be happiness in its place. This is the most fundamental and absolute law there is. If we break the law, then we will be arrested and punished. What we're talking about here, however, is not some worldly law, but is the spiritual law. And so its enforcement and the punishment is much more absolute and unescapable. So that if we act in one way, the result is inevitably suffering, conflict, stress in the mind. But if we act in the other way, then there's no suffering, and the mind is free and joyful. This absolute spiritual law is the fundamental law for everything that lives. For the most part, our human friends around the world are breaking this spiritual law more and more. Humanity around the world is increasingly ignorant about and arrogant regarding this spiritual law. And the result is a world that is increasingly in turmoil, and that human suffering is spreading quite terribly. The very obvious or physical, the very tangible results of this are the facts that it's necessary now to build more and more prisons, necessary to build more and more courts, more and more hospitals for the neurotic, and even more and more hospitals for the insane, and all kinds of other similar results which are quite obvious, that show that humanity is not very interested in this spiritual law and very fragrantly go about breaking it left and right. The selfishness that is behind all the problems in the modern world arise solely because of acting incorrectly regarding this ultimate spiritual law. The sole source of selfishness is this disobeying of the natural spiritual law. That this is happening more and more means that there is more and more selfishness in the world. First, there is just the violation of the spiritual law, which leads to a spiritual inner problem. But then this incorrectness usually continues, and that selfishness expresses itself in ordinary ways in the world, which are causing all these problems that we can see around us. Please look very deeply, very carefully into this matter. Look into the fact that our physical ailments, our sicknesses and illness of the body, different fevers and pains and aches and so on, that these physical illnesses are rooted in spiritual illness. That what seems to be wrong with the body is the deep cause of it is in these spiritual mistakes of the mind that is out of harmony with the natural law, with the ultimate spiritual law. A lack of awareness and basic understanding of what's happening in our lives, this is the spiritual disease. Not being aware and not understanding what's happening to us is this spiritual disease. And then because of this, we make all kinds of slips and errors. There's a lot of carelessness in how we live lives. And then the result is all kinds of physical ailments, all kinds of pains and problems, because we haven't been living our lives wisely. And then we go about spending all kinds of money and using up all kinds of resources because of this foolish way that we allow ourselves to live. As you all can readily see, if you take a look at the world, there are all kinds of political problems, all kinds of arguments and fights and selfish competition between nations in this world, all kinds of problems where the various parties aren't able to sit down and talk to each other in a civilized way or to reach fair and just agreements. Instead, there's a lot of petty selfishness and power plays and all kinds of things. This is one example of how this spiritual disease, spiritual illness is creating problems in our world. And then even further, because of the way we live our lives and because of these societies we have created, societies growing out of this spiritual illness, we have even lots of physical diseases that are occurring, strange and very, very frightening illnesses, of which AIDS is just one example, that are now happening in the world. Very, very strange and dangerous diseases that we now have to cope with. And this also comes from this spiritual illness. And then what is becoming one of the worst problems we have in the world now is drug addiction, which is solely happening because of this spiritual illness, because of spiritual emptiness, that people allow themselves to fall into such things as drug abuse and drug addiction. All of these are very tangible results of what happens because of this spiritual illness. that is rampant and epidemic in the world. Nature, or we could say God if we prefer, nature has created this world in a way that is fitting and appropriate for peace and happiness. The world as it was created is fine, is good. But because of spiritual illness, we have turned it into a mess. We have created all these problems because of our own spiritual illness, our lack of understanding, the fact that we have decided to live life selfishly for the sake of our own pleasures, especially for the sake of sex and sexual pleasures and other kinds of related enjoyments and entertainments. Because we live our lives just doing whatever suits our greed, our anger, our envy, our jealousy, our fear. Because we live our lives in this way, we have turned this world into a place where it's very hard to find peace or any true happiness. This is a shame considering how nature gave us a world that was fine, that was good to start with. Next, we should look at Dhamma as far as it is a partner of life. We need to have Dhamma with us all the time in the way that we would call it a partner, a constant partner or companion in life. Then Dhamma can perform its proper function. There are two kinds of partners in life. A physical kind of partner and a spiritual partner. Our physical partner in life means our husband, our wife, our mate. But then there's also the spiritual partner, which is the correct duty that is necessary for life. There's always the duty that life requires of us, moment to moment. This is our spiritual partner in life. If we're separated from our physical spouse, our husband or wife, for a few years, this wouldn't kill us. But if we're separated from this spiritual partner, as soon as we're separated, we die instantly. And so this spiritual partner is more important. This spiritual duty or this spiritual partner is just the opposite of what we were just talking about. This spiritual partner is to do what we need so that there's no more of this spiritual illness. To live, to think, to breathe, so that everything is correct, so that there's no more of this spiritual illness that's ruining the world. This is our spiritual partner, the thing that we need to have with us all the time. The understanding and ability to live life correctly right now. In fact, to call this a partner of life is probably not quite strong enough. We need to recognize it as life itself. Life itself is in living correctly according to the law of nature. This is our spiritual life. The most correct translation of the word Dhamma or dharma is the word duty. This word dhamma means far more than teaching or the studies and understanding and memorization of all the Buddhist scriptures. These limited traditional understandings of the word dhamma are quite hopeless. The correct meaning, the meaning that's been correct for even longer than Buddhism has existed, is the word duty. The duty that needs to be done every moment of life. This spiritual duty is the proper translation of the word Dhamma. This word Dhamma first appeared in human speech or in human understanding when a human being a long time ago first woke up to the fact that duty is absolutely necessary for human life. There is this one person who observed that it was duty that kept human beings alive, that we survived only by doing our duty. Having seen this person then called this duty, in their language back then, Dhamma. Dhamma means duty. And then we've now had this very important word, although it usually is misunderstood, which is the duty that needs to be performed so that we survive. Both survive physically, meaning that life continues, but also to survive spiritually, which is to be free of spiritual illness. This fact is very, very easy to understand and observe. All the cells in the body have their functions to perform. If the cells in our bodies would stop performing these functions, then we would die in a flash. There's no doubt or debate on this subject. And so physical life depends on the cells of the body performing their duties, their natural functions. It works the same spiritually, that in the mind there is always certain basic duties that need to be performed in life. That all the time, just as with the body, there are certain things that the mind needs to do. If these spiritual duties are abandoned, forgotten, or ignored, then immediately there will be spiritual death. And so duty, whether physically or spiritually, is absolutely necessary for life. And so we all ought to have this duty within us as our God. Our God should be this duty within us for the sake of the continuation of life, both physically and spiritually. Having this God of duty within us is the most important thing there is in life. When we have this correct duty within us, then it's the same as having God as our partner in life. The next point is that we need to have Dhamma. The next point is the fact that we must need Dhamma as a code of life. that in life there is need of a code as a kind of guidance, and that this code must be Dhamma. Then when we have Dhamma as a code of life, this will result in there being Dhamma as our mode of life. And when Dhamma is both our code of life and our mode of life, then life will be perfected. Or if we wish, we could call it an ideal of life, our ideal in life. Anyone who has this Dhamma as their ideal will have a life that is most successful and beneficial, and their life will go along correctly. When we genuinely have Dhamma as our code and mode of living, then it will result in life being both peaceful and useful. When our life is peaceful within us, then we ourselves will benefit tremendously. And when there's this peacefulness, then our life will also be of tremendous use to others. We can do many useful and beneficial things for others. But then because our lives and the lives of others are not really separate, they can't be separated, then this peacefulness and usefulness will be also inseparable. And when there's this peacefulness, it will lead to usefulness, both for others and for ourselves. This is the correct result of a life that has Dhamma as its partner. It will be a life that is both peaceful and useful. We hope that all of you can have a life that is both peaceful and useful. But now life is neither peaceful nor useful, because life is biting its owner. Each of us is being bitten by life because of love. Love bites its owner. Because of our anger, because of our fear, because of our confusion, because of our excitement, because of our boredom, our envy, our jealousy, our anxiety. All of these things are biting us because we don't know what Dhamma is, and we don't have Dhamma. And so instead of a life that is peaceful and useful, we have lives that are biting their owners. All of the Dhamma principles in Buddhism aim for just this peacefulness and usefulness. This is the point and goal of all of Buddhism, so that our lives will be peaceful and useful. The last point for us to discuss is that Dhamma is a way of life, for us to consider Dhamma as a way of life, that this is the way of living that will make our lives peaceful, useful, and successful. In Buddhism, we often talk about having a life that is above the world. What this means is a life that is above all the problems in the world. And so we're talking about a way of life that lives above and free of any problems in this world. This is the way of life that we're interested in Buddhism. Not to escape from the world, but just to be above the problems of the world. To be above all the problems in the world means to have a mind that is above and free from positiveness and negativeness. This means to be free of all kinds of duality, to not get caught up in dualistic pairs. When the mind is free of the influence or power of dualism, of positiveness and negativeness, then there's no problem in the world that can suck up and catch the mind. And then the mind can be above all these problems. This is the ultimate goal of Buddhism, to have a mind that's above all this positiveness and negativeness, all this duality, and is thereby a way of life that is free of all the world's problems. In the Christian Bible, this duality is called the duality of good and evil, just as in the book of Genesis, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil that God forbid Adam and Eve to eat. But they went and ate it, and so they got trapped in this duality, the dualism of good and evil. Or Lao Tzu of Taoism, he talked about yin and yang as the fundamental duality. Or modern science takes positiveness and negativeness, these qualities of positive and negative. This is the fundamental duality. In Buddhism, we prefer to call this, to speak of this duality in terms of good and evil. But whatever way we want to talk about it, whether in Christian, Taoist, scientific, or Buddhist terms, the important thing is to find a way of living that is above all influence, all power of these dualities, no matter how we talk about them. The essence of Buddhism is to not let these dualities have any power over the mind. Even if we let them have some influence to the degree that we recognize some positive or some negative, some good or some evil, that even if this has this bit of influence, to not let it get so carried away, that it creates a sense of self, a sense of ego, of I and mine. If we let these dualities concoct an ego, a self, then the spiritual illness will have taken hold once again. So the aim of Buddhism is to prevent this, to not let the dualities have enough power to construct the self or the ego. But really Buddhism teaches to not let these dualities have any influence, so that they're not even recognized at all by the mind, so they have no power whatsoever over the mind. Please listen very carefully, because we'd like to talk about the word nibbana, or in Sanskrit it's called nirvana. In Buddhism there are two levels of nibbana. The first level is when dualism is unable to concoct, to condition, to create the sense of self, the ego. But then the second level of nibbana is when there's no dualism in the mind at all. On the first level, the mind still can be influenced still accepts or believes in the duality, but doesn't go so far as to let this dualism condition the I, the mind, the ego. But on the second level, there's no influence of dualism at all. No, positive and negative don't have any power over the mind. This is a very subtle point. So we'll repeat it once again. The first level is where positive and negative, good and evil, right and wrong, doesn't create the ego, the self, the soul in the mind. The second stage of Nibbana is when there's no dualism in the mind whatsoever. So, in short, we'd like to encourage you all to study and explore Buddhism in terms of being the truth of life, of being natural truth, of being the ultimate law of nature, being the partner of life, being the code and mode of life, finally being the way of life. If you are able to investigate Buddhism in these different aspects, then you will certainly develop an appetite, a good and sufficient appetite for Dhamma and for meditation. But if you fail to look into these matters, then you probably won't have much of an appetite for meditation. So please give these things your wholehearted consideration. Excuse us for saying so, but it's true that so far you haven't had much of an appetite for these things, that you haven't had enough of an appetite for Buddhism, for Dhamma, for meditation. And so it's been necessary for us to talk about these things. But if you have an appetite, then you will have these four things we mentioned earlier. Chanta, or a genuine interest in and satisfaction with. Viriya, effort. You'll have enough energy and effort to put into meditation. There will be citta, attentiveness. The mind will really get in there and be attentive to things. And then vimamsa, the mind that investigates, that really explores things. Because of our lack of appetite, we haven't had these four necessary qualities. But when we have this satisfaction, this energy and effort, this attentiveness, and this exploration, this investigative quality, these will be paths, they're pathways to success, and so that we will progress and go deeper and deeper into the heart of Buddhism, and so that our meditation is successful. So forgive us for having to bring up this point, but it seems quite necessary. So finally, we like to thank you all for being good listeners, for being patient and sitting quietly throughout this talk. We wish you all success in coming here to study Dhamma and to practice meditation. We hope that your appetite will grow and that you will find greater and greater success in this endeavor. We wish you the best. And that will be all for today's talk.